A special thanks to our Man School sponsor, Phone Plus. Business telephone service, custom branding, marketing, quality, security, stability, guaranteed savings. PremierPhonePlus.com.
David Rives has devoted his life to researching and revealing God's fingerprints of design throughout the universe. As president of the largest media ministry in the world focusing on origin science, David uses his signature combination of science and history to make the Bible and Christianity come alive. As host of the Genesis Science Report, David explores the intersection between faith and science by tackling the topics of today head-on. He is also the director of the Wonder Center and Science Museum, the largest science museum in Tennessee, containing one of the top 10 planetariums in the world, kids' hands-on displays, and a 1 million volt Tesla experience. An expert in science and the Bible, David Rives has authored 2 books and is seen every day on TV with appearances on the History Channel, DirecTV, Newsmax, TBN, CBN, God TV, Dr. James Dobson's Radio, NRB TV, and has been featured on K-Love, FoxNews.com, The Christian Post, SiriusXM, and many more. Garnering millions of views on social platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, David's #1 goal is to impact those he meets with incredible accounts of discovery, biblical accuracy, and science. He shows us that each person is wonderfully made with purpose, a biological miracle from our designer. An award-winning producer, documentary director, and TV host, David has become the most prominent voice for origin science in our age. As an adventurer, he leads dinosaur digs, photo safaris to Africa, expeditions into the Grand Canyon, conferences at the Wonder Center in Tennessee, geology trips to national parks, speaking tours in Great Britain, filming expeditions, and shares the gospel to millions along the way. David's signature phrase for the past 18 years of ministry has been Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God. And now, David Rives.
All right, y'all. Sorry you had to bear through that, but hey, it gave me a moment to recuperate after those 4 grueling push-ups that I did. All right, so I want to talk to y'all for the next few moments about a little bit of the journey that it's a little hard to describe, and we'll have to leave out a lot. But it is one of the most remarkable things, and every day is a new adventure. So we're going to talk a little bit about never give up on your dreams. And, maybe I should actually just start with this. How many of you have one of these right here? Everybody, right? Did you know that the world's most intelligent computer ever developed, most powerful, most intelligent computer ever developed, it was actually designed in only 9 months. And I'm not talking about my iPhone. I'm talking about the human brain. Yeah, I'm talking about a supercomputer that each and every one of us have. Okay, so basically you're walking around with this supercomputer up here that allows you to process things, that allows you to comprehend things, that unlike AI, you can not just use intelligence, but you can use experience, and you can also philosophize about your very existence. And that's not something that is actually capable with machines. It's not something that we see in the animal kingdom either. It is distinctly human. It's what makes us completely unique. No ape sits there writing textbooks about biology. No animal or creature alive goes around and says, okay, well, I wonder how I got here. I wonder what the origin of life is, or what the meaning of life is. No, that's something that we in this room all have in common, and yet it's distinct to humans. So when I think about the most intelligent or smartest supercomputer on planet Earth that is not in our pocket but is in our head, I realize that our bodies are pretty unique as well. Because you see, basically we have this language, this blueprint that makes us who we are. We call it DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, but it's a whole lot more to it than just a string of characters called DNA. So geneticists tell us that if you were to spell out your DNA, your genetic code, there are trillions upon trillions of combinations that are involved. And based on the way these base pairs on this double helix is arranged, it makes each and every one of us in this room unique. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you are completely different than you are sure, we share bits and pieces of the genetic code, like how to make an eyeball, or how to make our fingerprints. But even our fingerprints are completely unique. Did you know that if you were to spell out the entire genetic sequence inside you right now, it would fill up about 1,200 encyclopedia volumes? I mean, that's a lot of information, isn't it? That's a book that was written that makes you special, that makes you unique, that makes you who you are. 1,200 encyclopedia volumes. But I'm not getting many gasps in the room, so maybe I should just kind of break this down just a little bit, because that entire 1,200 encyclopedia volumes, which is your blueprint making you unique, can be found in nearly every cell of your body. That means that there's enough information inside each and every one of us to fill up the entire Library of Congress multiple times. So there is this passage that I'm a Christian. There's this passage in the Bible that says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. That actually there's a book. In thy book, all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. So in other words, we all had this book written even before we were ever born, and it all makes us unique individuals with special talents and gifts. And so what I want you to do right now is just look at your thumb, your fingerprint for just a moment. There's not another person on planet Earth with that fingerprint. Now look at your thumbprint. There's not another person on planet Earth with that thumbprint. And that really makes you thumb body. What I'm telling you is that we are unique. And if we don't use those unique gifts, then we're missing out on something truly special. So I'm going to tell you about a little box. When I was about 8 years old, I just moved to Middle Tennessee. My family had just moved to Middle Tennessee about, 40 minutes from here. And I am walking around in my backyard at 8 years old, and I reached down and I picked up a rock. And I'm digging in the dirt as children do, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, hey, that's not a rock, that's a fossil. So I went and I got a kid's identification guide for fossils, and I started flipping through it until I found what that fossil was. Well, guess what that fossil was? It was something called a crinoid. A crinoid is a deep sea creature that lives at the bottoms of oceans. It has these little tentacles like this. It has this slender stem that goes down, and then it has this root, this big weight at the bottom of it. It's a creature. It's an animal that lives at the bottoms of the oceans. And so I went a little bit further in my backyard and I found corals and seashells and bivalves and all of these amazing things in my backyard in Tennessee. Now, I was looking around at that point and I was like, it just so happens that everything I'm finding are sea creatures, marine objects. The only sea in Tennessee is actually in the name of it. We don't have any water nearby, and so I thought that was very curious. So I began to do some research into it, and again, at 8 years old, it intrigued me that there was actually a historical record found in this book that we call the Bible that says that there was a lot of water in the past over the earth. I thought that was curious. So I took these fossils and I stuck them in a fishing tackle box. This little fishing tackle box. It was a small box. And before long, I had found more fossils and minerals than would fit in this fishing tackle box just from my backyard. And friends had started to give me a few geological samples and a few minerals and specimens. And so I said, well, man, I'm going to need a bigger box. So at 9 years old, I drag a tough box out from the carport into the house, and I put the fishing tackle box in that bigger box. And then I put another tackle box in that bigger box. And then I put another container and some more rocks in that bigger box. I went to the computer and I printed out, Scotch taped to the front, a black and white sign that I printed out. Rives Fossil Museum at 9 years old. Because it was just a dream, you know? It was a fun dream. What could I do? Could I have my own museum? Could I actually share these fossils with different people? And at 9 years old, yes, I would drag my friends over to that bigger box and I would open it up and I would say, you've got to see this. Look at this. Every rock is telling a story. Every fossil has something to show us. And in fact, everything that it's showing is actually pointing us back to biblical truth. And it's pointing us back to the idea that there is a God, that there is not just random nature here. And so the more I went through this whole progression, I realized, hey, I love science. Because it's not just, it's not just rocks and fossils. I loved animals. I loved looking at the stars. I loved all of these different things that could be referred to as science. And I also liked history. But what I realized pretty quickly is that science and history, they go hand in hand. Because you cannot understand history without science, and you can't understand science without history. What do I mean? In other words, if we don't have the history of human intellect, then there's no way we could do science, right? Because science comes from the word scientia, which means to have knowledge. So science is just knowledge of the natural world, knowledge of the world around us. It's like, oh, well, could I study that rose bush and could I try to figure out something about it? That's science. It doesn't have to be this high ethereal concept that nobody can get. No, it actually has this practical application. Open your eyes and look. And so when I understood that science, we needed history, the history of human intelligence to understand it, and then we need science to understand history. What do I mean by that? Well, every time we try to look into history, what do? When we're talking about the 250th anniversary of America, I went up to New Hampshire and I was trained in 3D subsurface radar, ground penetrating radar. A lot of people use this to identify mass graves in Afghanistan and other places. A lot of people use this technology to discover insufficiencies or cracks in bridges or infrastructure. But when I was trained in this technology, I was trained by going to unmarked graveyards in New Hampshire and finding, these 1600s, 1700s graves that had no headstone. And using science, we were actually able to locate graves that were not marked. Locate graves in the middle of a field by looking at the strata layers. And as you use this technology over the ground, you see the strata layers coming across. And then you move over a certain area, and then boom, it's disturbed. The strata stops, those layers stops, and then the strata starts picking up again. So what you know is that sometime in the past, someone dug through that natural strata layer and dug a grave. Something disturbed it. And so history requires science to understand it. Science like ground penetrating radar. Science like archaeology, right? Science like astronomy, if we're trying to understand the heavens. All of these things work hand in hand. And I realized that fairly early on, and that was, I think, extremely influential in my journey. Fast forward to 16 years old. Yeah, I loved science. But again, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was clueless as to where everything was going to lead me. I had passions, but that was all they were. At 16, I said, well, I don't know where I want to go next, but I do know that I love astronomy. So I started looking through telescopes, and I became fascinated because, again, if you look down in the ground, you find these fossils, and that's kind of like the microscopic world because you can use microscopes to analyze those fossils and tell you about them. But then you turn it around on the opposite spectrum and use telescopes to look up at galaxies and nebulae and stars and planets and all of that. And that's a whole different world completely. But it's just as fascinating and it's just as designed. And so I saw these patterns when I looked through telescopes, patterns like spiral galaxies or these planets that were so remarkable with moons and satellites orbiting around them, or nebulae, clouds of dust and gas in the sky that were actually beautiful. And I said, well, man, instead of dragging my friends to my backyard here in Tennessee and letting them look through the eyepiece of a little telescope and it's a little blurry, can I just adjust this? What if I could connect a camera to the back of the telescope and actually be able to share it with friends? So what started as a hobby quickly turned into something a little bit more serious, where the telescopes got larger and camera technology got better, and I began to connect these high-powered cameras to the back of telescopes. But at 16 years old, it didn't start like that, but at 16, I took my first photo of space. First decent photo. Sure, I got a few blurry ones. At 16, I focused in at the Great Orion Nebula. Now let me tell you about the Great Orion Nebula. Y'all know the constellation Orion? Can y'all spot that in the night sky? I think it's important for men to be able to navigate using a few basic things like the North Star, or be able to spot a few constellations. I mean, after all, that's the way it was done for thousands of years, right? So I think that's something that is actually useful, to be able to pick your way through the sky, just a few places. But I think we all know the belt and sword of Orion, right? You've got 3 stars in the belt and you've got 3 stars in the sword. Well, it's interesting because if you go over the 3 belt stars and then you go down between the first 2 stars of the sword and you look up in the night sky, you will see absolutely nothing. But if you use a high-powered telescope or an extremely high-powered binocular, whatever the situation might be, that's when you see a fuzzy spot. And then as the technology increases, you can see a little bit of definition in this fuzzy spot, and it actually takes a little bit of shape. But then if you connect a camera to the back of a telescope, well, you've got one huge advantage, because here's what happens. You see, with a camera on the back of the telescope, while our eyes looking through an eyepiece are taking snapshots every few microseconds, right? The camera can open the shutter and leave it open. And if the focus is right, that's when it gets really interesting, because it can bring out subtle details that we couldn't see with our eyes. So I focused in on this little spot that you can't see in between the first 2 stars of the sword of Orion. And I took a long exposure. And at 16, my jaw hit the floor. I'd always seen this picture in Sky and Telescope magazine. I'd always seen this picture in Hubble space photography, but I never dreamed that little old me, that an average person, that some common guy at 16 years old could even possibly come close to something like this. And I was blown away. And the first thing that I noticed is, wow, well, I mean, this almost looks designed. It's really beautiful. It's a cloud of dust and gas in space, but it actually, in that overexposed area right in the middle, is something called the trapezium. And the trapezium are 4 stars in a trapezoid shape that are so bright that they light up the whole rest of this nebula. Okay, and then the colors tell us a lot, because you can use spectral banding to cut through those colors, and you can figure out what types of gases, what types of elements, what types of, what things are in this nebula. So there's a science behind it. So again, the first thing that hit my mind was, whoa, this looks designed. The second thing that hit my mind was, as a Christian, I've always read this passage in Psalm 19. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. It says that day unto day utters speech, and night after night shows knowledge, but their speech, their voice or language continue to go towards us. Basically, the heavens are shouting that there is a grand designer, that you are not an accident of the cosmos. And that's something that is dangerous, that is being taught today, is that, hey, you're star stuff. You're just an animal, star stuff, the result of random accidents and chance, mutations, things like that. But the thing is, when we study science, we see these design patterns, and again, Space is not the ultimate example. You are the ultimate example. Human biology is the ultimate example of engineering and design. But I still saw it here. And so it reminded me of that verse in Psalm 19. And then the third thing that hit my mind at that moment was, why is this a hobby? You know, I'm 16. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I do know that I've got a great passion for this. I wonder if I could use this to share with other people around the world the beauty of God's creation, the beauty of the heavens, the way that science connects with our faith journey, the way that everything connects together, and that was a pivotal moment. So my brother and I, this is my brother Murray, my brother and I, when I was 18 years old, we formed a nonprofit, a 501c3. We went up to Nashville, downtown Nashville, signed all the paperwork, made it happen. You know, we're like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen and where this is going to lead, but I do know this feels like a calling. And so we did. We got a nonprofit. And I was like, what do I do next? You know, I guess I'm going to drag a telescope around and set up a camera and show people pictures and maybe do presentations. Or I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, but I guess we just have to start. So let's start. So my grandmother and a mutual friend down in Montgomery, Alabama, they pulled all the strings they could, and they're like, well, Eastern Hills Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama has agreed to let you present on a Sunday night. And they're going to let you show some pictures of what you've taken through the telescope. They're going to let you set up a telescope in the parking lot. You know, they typically have 75 people on a Sunday night, and you can kind of get your feet wet. Well, I never had spoken in public before, and so here I am, 18 years old, never spoken in public. I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. So I whip up this little PowerPoint presentation and I run to Taco Bell. And I asked the cashier at Taco Bell, I'm like, hey, would you come over to my house and let me practice a presentation on you? And then I asked another friend over here, would you come to my house and let me practice a presentation? 5 people, So I ran through the presentation, and they were like, well, it's pretty good, Okay, well, I guess I'm good to go. So I jump in a car, and I'm driving down to Montgomery, Alabama, from Nashville, Tennessee, and right outside of town, I started to hit these electronic billboards with my face on them. Famous astronomer tonight, Eastern Hills Baptist Church. And I'm a little bit nervous here. Obviously, I don't think I'm a famous astronomer, number one, but obviously they don't get the message. This is my first talk, Okay, so I get to the church. I'm ready for this 75 people on a Sunday night at Eastern Hills Baptist Church. And 550 people are there waiting on me. And so I take the stage for the first time and deliver a presentation, show some of these photos, talk about space and the grandeur of space and how it points back to the grandeur of the creator of space. And then I go out in the parking lot and I let people look at the telescope. And so that was 18. At 19, my brother and I said, why don't we try doing a documentary? Let's just do a video on this, and we'll talk all about space, and we'll use the photos that we've been able to get through the telescopes, and we'll just share it in a documentary. So we set up a green screen in the corner of our bedroom and set up a camera, and I'm standing there on green screen at 19 years old, and I'm talking about space, and I'm stiff like this right here, and I'm talking about space for an hour, and I'm showing these photos and looking around, and all of this is on green screen. It's not very well shot, but we're trying. Well, very shortly thereafter, months after releasing this thing, it started to get airtime on Christian TV. It was translated into Russian, German, Ukrainian. All of a sudden, all of this is just happening, and we had just formed the ministry. And we're like, wow, well, there's a hunger for knowledge about science, and especially knowledge about science where it connects with Christianity, because everybody says, in fact, Dr. Werner von Braun put it this poignantly. He said he basically sent men to the moon. He was this brilliant rocket scientist who said a lot of people look at science and religion as antagonists. They're not. They're sisters. While science tries to better understand creation, the world around us, religion tries to better understand the Creator. And his point was this, and this was extremely important, and we would do well to take note of this because it seems obvious. Creation requires a creator. Design requires a designer. And that is something that so often within the scientific community, we just bypass and we're like, well, science, we look at nature, so we have to explain everything naturally. Nature is all that there is, and what we don't realize is that what we've just done is we have replaced the God of the Bible, let's just say, with our own God, Mother Nature. You see what I'm saying? What you've just done is you've put nature on a pedestal and said, well, given enough time and chance, nature can accomplish anything. Nature can make you. Nature can create galaxies and whole universes. I mean, isn't nature amazing? What you've just done is you've deified nature. And we don't even realize what we're doing within the scientific community. So at 20 years old, I said, being we're getting some traction with this documentary, why don't we send it in to some other Christian TV and let's just see if we can get some more traction. Lesson number 1. Sometimes our plans get ahead of the plans that the Lord has for us. Okay, so I sent in this documentary. It was called The Heavens Declare the Glory of God. I sent it in to TBN. I was like, well, they're the biggest there is out there, so let's just send it in. So we sent in the documentary. I got a letter back from TBN. And it was from, the assistant to the president. And it was pretty soon after we sent it in. The letter said, this doesn't feel like content that we are interested in the network. Thank you for sending it in, but this, it's just not our style, And I was okay with that. Again, it probably wasn't the best produced anyway. But never give up on your dreams. So I kept going. And a few years later, we produced our second documentary. It was called In the Beginning. Now this one was a little bit more well done. It wasn't quite as cheesy. Yes, it was still not perfect, but it was a little bit better. And I said, okay, well, goodness, we've created this next documentary. I had just written my first book. I was 23 years old. I had just written my first book, done this second documentary, and I said, why don't we send this into a film festival? It's a Christian film, so let's just send it to a Christian film festival. So I sent it to only one film festival, which so happened to be the largest Christian film festival in the world at the time. And I sent it in, not really expecting much. I mean, obviously, I'd been rejected with, TBN and rejected here and have all of these letters to prove that, this is, some people love it and some people hate it. Well, it made it to semifinalist at the largest Christian film festival in the world. They said, David, well, we're having the award ceremony in San Antonio, Texas, and you need to fly out for it just in case you win an award or something. Where maybe it goes beyond semifinalist, whatever the situation is, you should come out, okay? So I fly out. But before I fly out, my brother makes 6-minute DVDs. You remember those things, yeah. The DVDs, and those DVDs were basically like promotional EPKs. They told a little bit about the ministry, told a little bit about what we were doing, and then, had our contact information at the end. Kind of like business cards. So I stuck them in my suitcase, and I flew off. I got up to San Antonio. It was a multiple-day film festival. Well, on the last day of the festival, I realized, you know what? I have not given away one of these things. And they're sitting in my suitcase, and they're probably going to make me go overweight on the way back because I've gathered a few things at the festival. So I run up to my room, and I grab this big stack of DVDs. 6-minute DVDs. And I go back down to the film festival, and I am trying to get rid of these things as fast as I can. I'm like, would you like a free DVD? Here, take a DVD. Would you please take a DVD? Just take a DVD. I'm sticking them in people's hands, and I think nothing of it. Well, fast forward several months later. And several months later, I realize that I haven't gotten a lot of traction with that. And the documentary never made it past semifinalist, okay? So it was still an honor, but hey, that's what it is. It is what it is. And so about 3 months later, I get a call. This guy on the phone says, David, you don't know me from Adam, but about 3 months ago, you stuck a DVD in my hand. He said, I'm a documentary producer, and he said, I didn't watch that DVD for months. He said, I just stuck it in my DVD player, and I'm watching it through, and at the end, I got to the contact card, and I saw your number. Like, our area codes are the same. We're neighbors. He said, can I buy you lunch? I said, well, sure, you can buy me lunch, yeah. So I go to lunch. This guy, he sits down, and he slaps a 3-page outline for a documentary that he's interested in making. He said, David, so I am going to make a documentary about hummingbirds. It's going to be feature length. It's going to have a custom soundtrack all the way through. It's going to have slow motion photography. It's going to be amazing. And I want you to host and narrate it. And I said, well, I'm honored that you would say that, but I kind of have two kind of things that maybe we need to address here. I said, well, number one, I believe that hummingbirds were designed. So if you're going to talk about the evolution of the hummingbird, it's not my style. I'm not your guy. And he said, no, we're looking at the design and engineering of the hummingbird. It's perfect. You're the perfect person for it. I love what you do. And I said, okay, well then that solves number one. Number two is, so hummingbirds are small and they can hover, right? What are you going to spend the other 59 minutes of the documentary talking about? Well, that's where we have to remain open, because as a result of studying for that documentary and hosting and narrating that documentary, I learned a lot about hummingbirds. I call them God's little wonder, and they are truly remarkable. So the hummingbird is the smallest bird on earth. It's the smallest bird proportionally of all living creatures. You see, the hummingbird can fly 34 miles per hour. It can fly forwards, it can fly backwards, it can fly side to side, it can hover, as we all know, it can turn upside down, and at birth, it weighs less than a Post-it note placed in the palm of your hand. It's tiny. The smallest warm-blooded creature. But you see, these hummingbirds fly from flower to flower collecting nectar, and they can tell just by tasting the nectar what the sugar content is. If it's less than 10% nectar, the hummingbird moves to the next flower, because it instinctively knows, it's built inside of it, that less than 10% nectar sugar won't support their super fast metabolism with a wing that is beating 80 times per second. Whoa. 80 times per second. Now, I'm not talking about like this. No, it beats in a figure-8 pattern like this, almost like a helicopter blade, 80 times per second. Now, I got so curious with this that I looked it up. The Guinness World Book of Drummers says that no drummer on planet Earth has ever gotten that fast. I'm like, wait a second. We can't even run a stick up and down at that speed, and yet there is a bird that is doing this at that speed 80 times per second, 80 times, 80 times, 80 times, 80 times, 80 times. I'm like, wow, this is an incredible bird. But that's nothing, because that 80 times per second to enable hovering flight means it has a super fast metabolism with a heart that is beating 1,200 beats per minute. Guys, if our heart beats a couple of hundred beats per minute, we probably ought to be headed to the emergency room, okay? I mean, I might have gotten close after 4 or 5 push-ups, but our heart is not designed for that. The hummingbird's heart is designed for that rapid heartbeat, 1,200 beats per minute. But there's a huge problem with this, a massive engineering flaw, you might say, with this. Because with that fast of a heartbeat, the hummingbird, when it settles down on a long, cold night, it should just die. It should not be able to make it through the night without a continual source of energy every few moments like it gets throughout the day as it flies from flower to flower to flower. It should die, and yet it doesn't die. Do you know why? Because there's a mechanism built inside of it called torpor. And torpor slows down the hummingbird's metabolism every night from 1,200 beats per minute to 35 beats per minute. And then the next morning, that heart starts speeding up and it flies away as if nothing ever happened. Question, I need your help right here. What if the hummingbird didn't have this feature built inside of it from the first day of its existence? It's a dead hummingbird, right? Okay, question number 2. What if the hummingbird had to evolve this feature slowly over mutations in time over, let's just say, 1,000,000 years? What would we have after the first night? A dead hummingbird, right? Okay, wait a second. Let me ask you, there's question number 3. What if the hummingbird, as it's flying around on its first day, realizes, you know what, I'm going to have a problem tonight. I am going to run out of energy and I'm going to die if I don't get a continual source of energy. So somehow I need to invent a way, maybe hyper-evolve a way to be able to slow my heart rate down so that I can actually make it through this first night. And I think, as brilliant as I am, this little hummingbird, I think I can evolve such a way in only 1 week's time. What do we have after the first night? A dead hummingbird. So what does this tell us about the hummingbird? What this does is it points to design. It points to engineering. It points to this idea that the hummingbird was built for everything it needed from the very first moment of its existence. So let me put it just a slightly different way. What I'm telling you is that it looks like the hummingbird was designed not just to survive. This is not about survival of the fittest, but the hummingbird was designed to thrive. What I'm also telling you is that each and every one of us in the room right here, we're designed not just to survive, but designed to thrive. And that is a lesson that we can all learn from. So, as I conclude, I want to bring it back to my 8-year-old self, because this documentary ended up going full circle. And around the exact same time of this documentary, I'm walking out of a hotel room in Lake City, Florida, about to speak at a church about the heavens declare the glory of God. Murray was there with me, and I got a call. I answered. Long story short, it was TBN. And they said, David, we've been watching some of your content, and would you be interested in having your own television show about science and the Bible? And we would give you the studio. We would fly you out to Dallas, Texas, to the International Production Facility. We would put up the whole crew. There would be, a jib on a massive crane that will come back, and there's a massive studio that's all set up, ready to go. We would give you the studio space. We'll give you about $1 million worth of airtime per year. We'll put it on our global station. We will fly out any guests that you want to meet with, scientists or experts or whatever. And what do you say? And I thought about it, and I was like, yes. Do you understand that there is a correct time and there is an incorrect time? And when we try to push it, it never works. This is what I'm telling you. A friend and mentor early on taught me something, one of the most important pieces of advice that I ever got and will ever probably have. And if you want to make a note of that, it is better to be, I'm paraphrasing here, it's better to be 10 years too late than 1 minute too early. It's better to be 10 years late than just 1 minute early. Because if you are 1 minute early, you are not prepared for what you're supposed to be doing. You're early. You're not ready. But if you're late in your time, you're perfect in the Lord's time. If you're late in your time, what you realize is that this journey, these experiences all along the way were setting you up for success so that then you could thrive in the moment that He had prepared for you. This is what it's all about. It's not about us trying to push and succeed and take ourselves as far as we can go. No, walk through the open door when the time is appropriate, and you will be amazed at the result. And I was amazed at the result because, that little box with a Scotch tape on the sign on the front of it that says Rives Fossil Museum, a number of years down the road has turned into the largest science museum in Tennessee. That tiny fishing tackle box full of fossils is now over 100,000 square feet. It contains exhibit halls on astronomy, biology, geology, of course paleontology and dinosaurs and fossils. It has live animals. We have a planetarium that ranks top 10 in the entire world with 1 million volt Tesla coils that produce electricity, and you're in the same room with lightning bolts. We have kids' hands-on activities galore. We have a new aquarium that is opening up May 26th. In the lower level. It's 3 levels, over 100,000 square feet. It is the most amazing thing that I never planned. And that's the point. We need to stop planning. We need to stop trying to push things that maybe aren't designed for us. By stop trying to push, what I found was, I was sitting in the studio one day and I had a friend who sculpts dinosaurs. He called me and he said, he's from Ohio. So let me see if I can imitate this. His name was Buddy Davis. He's passed away now, but he sculpts dinosaurs. And he said, David, he said, I've been asked to lead a trip to South Africa, a creation family photo safari. And I would like you to co-lead it with me. And I said, well, buddy, I'm honored. I said, but buddy, I never have been to Africa before. He said, well, that's all right, David, neither have I, but we'll figure it out as we go. And so we did. We co-led our first trip to South Africa in 2018. And then his health declined, and I continued to lead I continue to lead these trips at least every other year, but lately it's been every single year. I take 40 people into the bushveld of Africa, rent out an entire reserve. We have a mountain to our own. We have private cabins. I take people in these open air game vehicles where we get really close to not just giraffe and zebra and impalas, but also to things like cheetahs and lions and all of these different creatures. And all of that started just by answering a call and saying, okay, I'll try. I don't think I'm equipped, but I'll try. I was invited to a dinosaur dig, a paleontology dig. And this guy said, well, would you just present on astronomy and the Bible? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I come out to give a presentation for a paleontology dig, for a dinosaur dig. And they said, you want to stick around for the dig? We'll take you out in the field and show you what it's about. I said, well, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to dig up a dinosaur. What are you talking about? Throw me in the briar patch. So I said, absolutely, I'll stay around. So one of the leading paleontologists in that field started training me in the Niobrara Formation and other areas on bones, how to identify plaster jackets, how to safely remove them, how to get them back, how to study them, how to interpret them. And I was amazed. And that happened for several years in a row. I was invited back. And then they would say, you want to go out in the field and dig with us, even though you're only here to present? Absolutely not going to do that. And then after a number of years, they said, David, why are you just coming out to present? Why don't you lead your own dig? And I was like, well, I never have led a dig before, but I suppose I could give it a shot. So I started leading paleontology digs, families from 8 years old to 80 years old, in the middle of the Niobrara Formation in Kansas, in western Kansas, middle of nowhere, digging up thousands of fossils. Pieces of mosasaur jaws and flippers. Mosasaurs, these giant 30 to 50 foot marine predators, massive dragons in the sea that we're digging up in the middle of Kansas. All of these things. Yeah, there's some irony to that. Think about the implications. Wait a second, Kansas is kind of landlocked, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, this has led me around the world. And every time, it's come back to never give up on your dreams. So here's our takeaways. It is better to be 10 years late than 1 minute too early, because miraculous things will happen when you're right on time. You may be late according to your dreams, but you're right on time. Number 2, don't underestimate the little things. The tiniest bird on earth, the hummingbird, can teach us lessons that goes way beyond the philosophy of man, that goes to practical lessons and points us back to a grand engineer. Those are our takeaways. But I also want to remind you to find your passion. Whatever you're passionate about. Man, I loved science, digging up fossils in my backyard, looking into space. I was passionate about it. Find that passion. And then follow your gifting. Because you can be really passionate about something and it's not your gifting, right? It's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're like, oh yeah, well, I love this. Man, it could be anything, but that's not what you were called to do. I love vacuuming carpet, but that may not be what you're called to do. Find your gifting and see if it aligns with a passion that you have. And then, last, never give up on your dreams. Because those dreams that I had at 8 years old in that little fishing tackle box, Rives Fossil Museum, it took a number of years, but it turned into the Wonder Center and Science Museum right up the road in Dixon. And it has turned into opportunity after opportunity. I would invite each and every one of you, follow what we're doing. We've got some little blue cards out in the front. Make sure you put your name, email address, and phone number on that blue card. Drop it in that fishbowl before we'll talk for a while. But drop it in the fishbowl because I want to be able to keep up with you and I want to be able to tell you what's going on because, again, if you've got kids or grandkids, bring them out May 26th for the grand opening and ribbon cutting of Wonders of the Sea, Oceans of Awe at the Wonders Center. The brand new aquarium, and then it's a whole museum day as well with a lot of other activities. And then in June, we're doing a conference called the Wonders of Creation Conference. I have got my friends, most of whom I made as a result of that TBN connection when the TV show started. It ran for 9 years, and I started inviting the most brilliant scientists and PhDs that I could possibly find. They would all take my call because of the network, right? Because of the clout. And I would say, hey, Mr. PhD scientist, would you like to come on my television program and talk about your latest research? And of course, the answer was always no. Yes, of course it was. It was like, really? I can share about topoisomerase enzyme number 2 with deoxyribonucleic acid? Absolutely. And so those connections turned into the most amazing phone book of scientists, world changers that are actually making a difference out there, many of whom are coming to this conference that we are now hosting, breakout sessions, plenary sessions, concerts, all these types of things, June 10th through the 12th. All of these things would not have been possible had I not picked up that little fossil at 8 years old. All of these things, I feel pretty confident I probably wouldn't be standing right here right now if I had not looked through that telescope at 16 and said, what if this is more than a hobby? What if this passion was what I was supposed to be doing? And with all of that, those things can take you around the world and open up opportunities that you never dreamed. I'm sure we're a little bit late, probably. I don't know, but do we have time for a few questions? Q&A? Yeah, we will do a Q&A. Does anybody have a question on? Yes.
David, what time is the presentation day of the 26th. What time is it going to start?
Yes, starts at 10 a.m. is the door open. I think the local bank has just sponsored the first 100 students to come in are getting free admission. So I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a line out there at 10 a.m. But then the ribbon cutting, I think, is at 11. So definitely, if you're going to come, try to make it at 11. But it doesn't close until 4. So if you can't make it until later on the 26th, yeah, come on out and absolutely, the fish will still be there when you get there. Yeah.
The second question seems obvious. The helicopter technology was designed based around hummingbirds, correct?
It's something called biomimicry. So what we found is that we tend to mimic biological things, right? Whether it's a little sticker, a little cocklebur in the middle of the yard, and we're like, oh, it's stuck to my jeans. Ooh, could I make Velcro? Or whether it's the hummingbird, and they're like, whoa, that would make a good rotor. Maybe we could hover too. And the thing is, and we do this all the time, it's called biomimicry. We're mimicking biology. We never get anywhere close to the efficiency of the actual thing. And that's that means that it was designed and engineered perfectly for what it does, because that helicopter uses a tremendous amount of fuel. I mean, the hummingbird, it has to get a little bit of sugar water at 10% sugar. Well, I wish we could just put 10% octane into our helicopters and they'd fly. No, obviously, anytime we try to mimic it, we can't get anywhere close to the efficiency, but yes, it's an example of biomimicry, where we think, yeah?
Technology came, correct?
Yes, absolutely. It's where we think God's thoughts after him. And we say, could we mimic it? Yes. Have I ever met Neil deGrasse Tyson? I have not. Neil and David Attenborough are the two people that I wish that I could meet. People say, if you could meet anybody in the world you want to meet, who would it be? It's not. I'm going to meet Jesus one day. I'm not worried about that. But it's not Paul, and it's not Moses, and it's not this, and it's not. No, it's Neil deGrasse Tyson and David Attenborough.
And who are they?
Neil deGrasse Tyson is the most famous astrophysicist atheist on planet Earth. And David Attenborough, if you've ever turned on the Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, or National Geographic and seen any animal documentary, and you've heard the most incredible facts about an animal for an entire hour in this beautiful British accent, and then at the end of it, after you heard about the design of this creature, and at the end of it, you'll always hear, and all of this happened over billions of years of evolution, right? Those two people, if I could just talk to those people and make them understand the patterns, the very fingerprints of God's design that are spelled out through the universe from the farthest galaxy in the cosmos to the microscopic structure of our DNA, that would change the world, because those two people have extreme influence. But they're using their influence not for something positive. They're using their influence to teach someone that they're simply an animal, an accident of the cosmos. Yeah.
How did Noah build the ark, in your opinion? Not God's instruction, but how did he physically build the ark?
How did Noah physically build the ark? Obviously, he was following God's blueprint that he was given. He had a number of years to build this structure, and he had probably unlimited help. Because I don't know about you, I'm assuming we got business owners in the room here, but I can actually hire someone who doesn't believe the same way that I believe, and they will work, and they'll work pretty good because they like something called money. And so Noah could have hired the whole village to help him build this thing, and they would have done it, even though they thought, you're a crazy old man. It's never going to rain. It's never going to flood. It's not a problem. And so he built it to God's specifications, but he had a lot of help.
120 years?
Yes, there's a little bit of debate on the chronology of that, but yeah, approximately 100 years that he had as a window to build it. And not that it took him that long, but yeah, he had plenty of time. Yes?
David, this may be a minute too early question. What's your vision, your dream, the Wonder Center?
The dream of the Wonder Center. So the Wonder Center is quickly becoming a destination. We get about 20% of our visitors now from out of state. And that number is quickly growing. As the largest science museum in Tennessee, but the largest science museum in the world from a biblical perspective, from a creation perspective, we intend to grow it. We intend to grow the number of events. I've got a dinner theater on site. Many of you have been in the dinner theater. Mark, I'm looking at you. We've got a 70-seat dinner theater with a full commercial kitchen. We have our own in-house chef. We have a 450-seat auditorium, beautiful performance hall with 20 fly bars and a massive 60-foot stage. So we want to ramp up concerts and other events like this big conference that's coming up. Our vision is to expand the Wonder Center. Right now we're trying to raise about 70-something thousand out of $100,000 that we need to increase the animatronic dinosaurs. It's a huge hit. All of our dinosaurs are huge hits with children, grandchildren, and even adults. And so that's the next step, is to even increase that. Right now we've got, full-size T-Rex head, a full-size Mosasaur, 55-foot-long Camarasaurus. We've got a full-size Utah Raptor. We've got an Acrocanthosaurus juvenile. We've got a Stegosaurus juvenile. We've got a T-Rex animatronic. But we want to grow. We want to grow. So that's the...
Got a meteor.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a meteor that you can touch. Absolutely. Yes.
David, you did a great job explaining intelligent design and the proof God's given us for that. In your archaeology and other studies, how about a couple of points supporting the young Earth?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I have a lot of friends on, both sides of that spectrum, but most of my colleagues, this is the thing, I have a lot of friends who have considered both. Well, is it a young Earth or is it an old Earth? But most of my colleagues, most of the experts, most of the scientists that I'm friends with, 100% say all science, all new cutting-edge science is pointing to a younger Earth, younger universe. And it's super interesting. So I'll just give you one example. A few years ago, we were two paleontologists were digging in the Hill Creek Formation in Montana, and they came across a T-Rex, and this T-Rex was really well preserved. And it's laying in the dirt, and they said, my goodness, this was Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her colleague, Dr. Jack Horner. Now, Jack Horner, you may remember that name because he was part of the research for Jurassic Park. He was advising in the movie as an actual paleontologist. So they find this T-Rex and they say, whoa, this thing is really well preserved. We need to get it out. So they bring in a helicopter and they're going to helicopter the femur of this T-Rex out. And they realize that the femur is so big and so heavy that it overloads the payload of the helicopter. So what they do is they said, okay, well, so how are we going to get this out and study it? I guess we're going to carefully take this femur bone, this leg bone of this T-Rex, carefully cut it in half. Then we will helicopter one half out. Then we're going to bring the helicopter back. We'll cradle it underneath. We'll helicopter the other half out. Then we're going to glue it back together once we get to the lab, and nobody will know the difference. So that's what they did, and it seemed crazy, but it actually worked. And when they cut it in half, they realized that inside was soft, stretchy material. Blood vessels, osteocytes, proteins, collagen, other original biomolecules, not contamination, original biomolecules in the middle of this dinosaur T-Rex thigh bone. And it revolutionized, it shocked the world, because the world had always assumed that dinosaurs went extinct about 66 plus million years ago. Some of them 500 million years ago. But the thing is, I don't know about you, I'm kind of skeptical that blood vessels will last for 66 million years. And so they said, my goodness, there's only two ways of looking at this. Either what we've been telling people about the age of dinosaurs is wrong all of these years, and obviously they were buried much more recently in a more recent catastrophe. Ooh, it seems like maybe we're kind of going towards a biblical implication here. Or Second option is, I guess blood vessels can last for 66 plus million years. You know which the secularists decided to go with, obviously. They're like, well, somehow I suppose that blood vessels just last that long. No, of course not. The implication is that these things were buried catastrophically during a massive flood thousands of years ago, but not millions of years ago. And again, that is just one of the shocking new discoveries that seems to be pointing us back towards a more biblical chronology. Yeah. Yes, sir?
What is the most interesting piece in your museum? Like if somebody came and robbed everything in the museum but this one piece,
Yeah.
what would it be?
That would have to be, it's going to be a hard pick, but it's not a hard pick. It is a 1,000-year-old Torah scroll from the Cairo-Genizim. Now, if you go to any museum, the Museum of the Bible, any museum throughout the world, you're going to see about 70% facsimile and 30% real deal. And when it comes to the 1,000-year-old scrolls, it's always going to be a facsimile. It's not going to be the real, especially when it comes to the Cairo-Genizim. Because the Cairo-Genizim is basically the equivalent 1,000 years ago to the Rosetta Stone. So there was this synagogue in Cairo that had a secret chamber inside of it that contained scrolls. And a scholar from Cambridge University heard of the existence of the secret chamber. So he goes down to Cairo and he's like, is it a trap door? Is it like, where is this thing? And he finally sees this window up in the walls of the synagogue, and he gets a ladder, and when he climbs up, it's not a window, it is a door into a secret room filled with scrolls. And he realized, my goodness, these scrolls are 1,000 years old. They tell us stories. This is in the 1800s. And he said they tell us stories that are so important they allow us to recognize language patterns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, plus his biblical scrolls. Let's take them back and analyze them. So he took 99% of those scrolls back to Cambridge University, and they studied it, and they went in vaults, et cetera, et cetera. But about 1-2% went to private owners, including a friend of mine who's now passed away. That friend, Rusty Maisel, he showed up after a filming session that I had in Dallas, Texas. I was at the guest house. I'd just finished a long day of filming. And he sits down on the couch next to me, and he's tapping a little cardboard tube in his hand. And he said, David, you know, the Israeli Antiquities Authority, the government's been trying to purchase a piece from me for unspeakable, untold, insane amounts of money for years. He said, and I keep turning them down because, they'll probably study it, but then it's going to go in a vault. I just know it. And so I don't want that. I want people to experience history. I want people to be able to feel it. I want it to be able to impact families forever. And he said, so I keep turning them down. They want to purchase it, and I keep turning them down. And then he proceeds to pull this 1,000-year-old scroll out of this little cardboard tube that he's been tapping. And he said, so David, I just want you to have it. Just take it. And he puts it in my hand. And that scroll is not just a piece of history, it's also God's Word of truth. It's 100% scientifically accurate, it's 100% historically accurate, it's 100% prophetically accurate, and it's all pointing back to Christ as well. But at the same time, this scroll is from the book of Exodus. And you notice that these Hebrew characters, it's written on an antelope hide. And this antelope hide, this full antelope hide, has these Hebrew characters in it. And it's an unusual spacing in this center column. And you're like, what are these gaps? Well, this is a poem. This is a poetic spacing only found one place in the entire Bible. And I know exactly where this is. This is the Song of Moses. This is where the Israelites sang a song of rejoicing after they crossed the Red Sea. But did I mention that this is the center column, which means that the column just over here, or for y'all just over here because they read from right to left, right? The column just over here is the crossing of the Red Sea, where the Lord opens the waters of the Red Sea and they go across on dry land. They sing a song of rejoicing, and then he provides manna in the wilderness for his people. And that piece, the actual piece, is on display in the Wonders of Literature in that museum. And that, not just the story behind it, but the fact that it is preserved to this day, 1,000 years down the road, word for word identical to what I have right here. That means a whole lot to me. And so you can steal my meteorite, you can steal my dinosaur bones, but that is special to me. Yeah. One more question? Yeah?
Yeah, and talking about the great design, okay, you've got the human experience, the DNA, all the way through space. Can you just mention a little bit about the laminate that connects all that?
Elaborate just a little bit further. What do you mean?
The symbol.
Oh, yes. It's not my specialty. There's a guy named Louis Giglio who did some research, and so I won't go too deep. But yeah, there is basically an element inside people's bodies. It looks almost like a cross, and it helps hold things together. You know, it's interesting that if you think about the laws and physics of the universe, we see that they're fairly consistent. In other words, I don't have to worry about floating off of this platform right here. Gravity seems to work, right? We seem to not have to worry about, Earth crashing into Mars anytime soon. It just seems to all work. And there's this passage in the Bible that says that by Him, by Jesus Christ, all things consist. Everything is held together by Him. So while in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, time, space, and matter in the single first verse of the Bible, while that is the origin of probably a lot of the physics that we are operating under today, basically the Bible makes it explicitly clear. If the Lord were to say, let it run, then everything would fall apart instantly because He is holding everything together. Thank y'all so much for allowing me to share. I appreciate it.
Wow. A special thanks to our Man School sponsor, Phone Plus. Business telephone service, custom branding, marketing, quality, security, stability, guaranteed savings. PremierPhonePlus.com